What's up guys, my name is Ace, and with the Gunfight Alpha coming this weekend for Modern Warfare on PS4, I wanted to share my top 10 tips to help you dominate this mode. Now with these tips, you're probably wondering, how can you be giving tips on a game mode that hasn't even been released to the public yet? Of course, yes, I do understand that over time, I will actually be developing far more tips, and we'll get into far more depth with this, but just keep in mind, I have actually played Gunfight a few different times now. First at the Infinity Ward studio back in May. This is competing in a tournament against about 30 other YouTubers, many of which were on PC. And Inkslasher and I actually dominated and won that tournament at Infinity Ward against other YouTubers who are very good players. Additionally, I had more gameplay experience when we were at the event in LA about a month ago now, and when I played there as well, I had a lot of success, didn't lose a single game. So at this point, I would say I'm actually one of the more experienced YouTubers when it comes to this gunfight mode, and therefore I do hope you'll take these tips seriously, even though this mode has not been released to the public quite yet. So with that, let's hop into the list, keeping in mind this is in no particular order. I'm just going to go through this list as I have it written down. And the first tip that I have for you guys is communication. Communication is absolutely key in gunfights. This is a 2v2 mode. You only have one person you have to communicate with, and it's pretty simple communication. It's really not that difficult to call people out and where they are and what you're doing and what they're doing. So make sure you're doing this. Even if you're just playing solo and you're hopping in and you're playing with a random, try and hop on that mic, and hopefully they will have a microphone as well. Even if they don't, make those call outs anyways. They may be just listening, and they will definitely appreciate that. It's very important to communicate with your teammate in this mode. Going off of that tip, this brings us to the next tip, which may seem quite obvious. We will get into more gameplay specifics in a second here. But this next tip that I have for you guys is try to party up with somebody. Somebody that you know, or at least somebody that you know has a microphone and will be talking, because this makes a huge difference. One of the reasons I also wanted to make this video was to help you guys actually find somebody. If you don't have somebody to play Gunfight with, feel free in the comment section of this video, post your PSN as well as the region that you play in. That's also important so you can get a decent connection with someone that you're connecting to. And feel free to use the comment section of this video to try and find a duo partner that you can play Gunfight with. Trust me, this will make such a big difference playing with a like-minded person that is actually using a microphone. So those are the more big picture general tips that aren't directly related to gameplay, but they are extremely important. That's like step one to hopping in Gunfight. You want to be playing with somebody that's at least talking back to you. Now let's get into the more gameplay specifics. And the first one I have for you guys that's relating directly to the gameplay is mix up your gameplay style constantly. Keep the enemy players guessing. And don't be predictable and get locked into the same route or the same sort of style of gameplay every single round, because any sort of a half-decent player will start to learn your playstyle and they'll adapt to that and they'll take over. I remember there were actually a few different games that we played when we were at the Infinity Ward studio where right at the beginning of the game, we were actually down a couple rounds. It was like 0-3, but after those rounds, we could see that those enemy players were using the same tactics and the same strategies every round. And therefore, after a little bit of communication with each other, we adapted to their playstyle and we actually managed to take over and win the game. So keep mixing up your gameplay styles. Some rounds, it's actually really beneficial to just camp back in your spawn and force those enemies to come out and push towards you. Other times, you might want to go for that direct rush. Make sure you're constantly trying to mix things up on your enemies, and always keep them guessing. This is really a mind game when you look at the big picture of an entire match, not just a round-to-round sort of thing. But the big picture of a match is really about keeping your enemies guessing and also trying to figure out what they're doing and see if there's any patterns that emerge within their gameplay. Because a lot of players, they will just do the same thing over and over and over again. And once you learn that, you'll be able to dominate them. This brings us to the next tip that's really important in the gunfight game mode, and this is footsteps. Now, the footsteps in Gunfight, I do think they are toned down from the standard modes, and therefore they are quite faint based on my experience with it so far. Although, keep in mind, I was playing in a fairly loud environment with a lot of people around and talking and stuff, so perhaps I'm just remembering this wrong. But you could definitely tell if someone was sprinting in Gunfight, you could hear their footsteps fairly clearly as long as you weren't sprinting as well, and as long as there wasn't a lot of gunfire going off. So this means, in some situations, it's a really smart idea to just sit and wait for a second and just try to pick up a footstep sound, which will give you an indication of where that enemy is, and then you can make your move based on that. On the other end of that, you really want to be aware of when you're sprinting in gunfight. You really want to use sprinting sparingly. Like, yeah, you can use it at the beginning of the round. Also, if there's a lot of gunfire going on, you can generally use that window of opportunity to sprint. But aside from that, you generally want to just be walking around the map or even crouch walking for maximum silence. Going off of this tip, this brings us to the next one, and this is something that I more so noticed when I was watching gunfight gameplay back afterwards, when I had a nice quiet environment with my headset on. I did notice that the music that plays between rounds, it tends to play several seconds into the next round. And as a result, you may miss a vital sound cue at the beginning of a round, like a footstep or maybe even a gunshot. You might have a hard time pinpointing where that gunshot is if you've got this music also playing in the background. So this tip is, if you have the option available, which I'm not too sure if we will have this option in the alpha, but we definitely should have this available in the full build of the game at least, completely mute the music setting within the game audio while playing gunfight. As cool as that audio might sound, it can actually affect your gameplay performance. Next up is a tactic that I used a lot while playing gunfight, and it was so helpful in determining the outcome of the round. This is, when possible, always try to get an early peek on where the enemy is going. Even if this is just a quick glimpse of an enemy going to the left or going to the right, or sometimes even noticing that an enemy just didn't go somewhere. Even if you didn't actually see them, but you know for sure they didn't cut through this particular lane or they didn't go this particular way. That's important information that you should be sharing with your teammate right away, and hopefully they'll be doing the same. Because with this early information in a round, you can generally get a good idea of what the enemy players are going for that round, and you can adapt your playstyle accordingly. Now, this might be a little bit more difficult on some maps compared to others. I know it's great on the map King. This is an excellent tactic for King. And also, sometimes it doesn't work with the tactic that you plan to use that round. If you're going for that beeline rush right down the middle at the beginning of the game, you might not get an opportunity for this early peek. So that's why I say, when possible, try to get this early peek. It will give you a good indication of how the round will progress. Next up, this is something that I noticed when I played. A lot of players were just not thinking about this. It wasn't in their head at all. After the 40 seconds elapses, a flag will appear in the middle of the map, and this is basically like a little overtime. If you capture that flag, which takes about 3 to 5 seconds to capture it by standing on it, you will end up winning the round. As a result, if the round starts to come down to that last 10 seconds or so, make sure you're playing for positioning on that flag. I'm not saying it's always the best idea to just go and lay down where the flag is going to appear, because a good player will be expecting that and they'll also be pushing for position. But at the very least, within that last 10 seconds of a round, if you're not actively in a gunfight, you want to try and get yourself into a situation where you can at least end up getting a line of sight on that flag within a second or two, because the enemy might actually have gone for that flag. And I saw far too many rounds where players were just capturing that flag completely uncontested by the other enemy. So always be aware, when that flag appears, you want to be able to get a line of sight on it quickly, otherwise they might capture it from right under your nose. Going off of this one, when that flag appears, if nobody captures it, the team with more health at the end of the round will actually get the win when that time expires. So a big thing to remember here is at the top of the screen, you will see how much total health your team has. Make sure you're using that when it comes to the flag. If you have more health than the enemy player, generally you don't want to risk going for the flag, but instead you want to get a line of sight on that flag, because that person either has to cap or they have to deal damage to you in order to win. So the stress really isn't on you to be pushing anything at that point. Being aware of that health bar, though, does go beyond just this final situation with that flag. Knowing how much health the enemy has can be very important in your decision making, because you don't naturally heal in gunfights. So if you see a player that's really low health, maybe they've just got 3 health left, and you've still got quite a bit of health on your end, then you can feel pretty comfortable pushing that player and finishing them off. Additionally, this becomes really important when shotguns are involved, because depending on the attachments, oftentimes I found that shotguns weren't really a one-hit kill if the enemy had full health, but if they had been damaged a little bit from earlier, then you can be comfortable knowing that just getting any hit on that player will most likely result in a one-shot kill. So that will affect your decision making when you go into that fight. I've also seen this in sniper rounds. If you get a hit marker with a sniper rifle, you can deal like 90 damage to the enemy player. If you've got a pistol as a secondary, you probably just want to use that pistol to clean him up, because it's going to be a one-shot kill whether you hit him with a pistol or the sniper rifle. And it's much more forgiving and much easier to shoot them with a pistol. So awareness of that health bar on the top of the screen can absolutely help you with your decision making throughout a game and help you win rounds. Moving on to the next tip, this is general class awareness. Between every round, when you get that countdown, you can see what sort of class setup you've got. You can see your primary, secondary, and your equipment. Always be sure to at least have a quick glance at that so you know what's at your disposal throughout a round. Enya was telling me when she played, she thought she had a stun grenade and she went to stun an enemy, but it turned out it was a smoke grenade, and that just caused a lot of chaos and it was unnecessary. Additionally, sometimes with class setups, the secondary weapon will actually be something that you're much more comfortable with. And if you didn't look at your class setup, you might not know that you have this really good secondary at your disposal, and you might be struggling with the primary instead. So it might seem obvious, but in the moment, sometimes you might just forget to look at that class setup. Make sure you just have a quick glance and see what's at your disposal. So finally, I've got one more tip I wanted to share with you guys for gunfights relating to gameplay. And this is, you usually want to try and keep yourself within a relatively close distance to your teammate. The reason for this is if your teammate gets into a bad situation, they get into a gunfight, they deal some damage to the enemy, but they end up losing, you want to be able to get there and clean that enemy up before they have time to reload and gather their thoughts. You want to be able to trade that out and kill that player and finish that player off so you can continue with the round. You don't want to end up in a situation where that player survives and is able to gather his thoughts and regroup with his teammates so that they can now tag team you. Now, of course, sometimes it is beneficial to mix things up and really separate from your teammates and go your separate ways on the map. Maybe that's the tactic you're going for that particular round. But in general, especially when you get to that mid-round sort of situation after the initial rush, you want to stay within a relatively close distance to your teammate. I'm not saying you should just group up with your teammate and follow them everywhere and like hug up close to them. Just put yourself in a situation that you can get to them reasonably within a couple seconds. This is especially important in a 2v1 situation. When there's one enemy left, you want to make sure that you are at least somewhat close to your teammate. That way that person can't just pick you off one at a time and regroup and regather their thoughts in between kills. You want to be able to get there and help your teammate finish that kill. This might seem obvious, but even with YouTubers who, like I said, they're generally very good players, I was noticing a lot they were going for that lone wolf sort of a playstyle, and I did see a couple really nice 1v2 clutches because they weren't getting close to each other and working together to finish off that last kill. But with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's video on the top 10 tips that I have for you guys to help you dominate the gunfight mode during this alpha this weekend. Like I said, once we get into the full build of the game and I get way more experience in playtime, I will be going over several more advanced tactics when it comes to gunfights, probably even some map-specific tactics and general routes and everything. That's a series that I'm actually really looking forward to making this year. But of course, I'd like to know in the comment section below, even if you haven't played Gunfight yet and you've just been watching gameplay, what other sorts of tactics do you think would be really effective to use within the gunfight mode? Just let me know those thoughts in the comment section down below. Also, like I said at the beginning, if you guys are looking for a duo player, post your PSN as well as your region down below and use that comment section to find other like-minded players that have microphones and are willing to communicate and work together for the win. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time. Yeah.